I'll be speaking with Ali Al Ahmed. Al Ahmed is a Saudi journalist and analyst focusing on the politics of the Persian Gulf region. He is often interviewed on CBS News, CNN, PBS, Fox News, and Al Jazeera. He heads the Institute for Gulf Affairs. We're going to talk about the career of the late President Jimmy Carter, in particular, his role in the Gulf and Saudi Arabia. Ali Al Ahmed will be speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me, and please stay safe in the snow.
Okay. Before we go on to the big issues like the Carter Doctrine, let's start with the personal. In 1979 in Saudi Arabia, as a child, you took part in a protest. How old were you, and where did this take place?
I was 12 years old, in my hometown where I was born, in the oil field, in the heart of the oil field, and where things were so bad, we didn't have a hospital. For example, our school, where I went to elementary school, didn't have a roof. Basically, we were studying and seeing the sun and the sky, and there was no air conditioning, and things were so bad. The roads were impassable, and although you go on your house and you can see the oil port. The Saudi government, with the support of the United States, basically ignored these people and did not offer them the minimum of dignified living. And I think people had enough, and they came to the streets. That was in November of '79, and of course, what happened, the reaction was again by force and shot people. I lost several members of my family. And later I found out that Carter had ordered support for the Saudi crackdown on these protests. So that's why I feel disgusted when I hear people talking and heaping praise on Jimmy Carter. The reason I'm here in exile, it's Jimmy Carter. So this person is one of the worst people to my people and to many Arabs and Muslims, in the Gulf and in the Levant and North Africa, because he supported dictators and did not care for the people
Do
as
you recall,
and like
I'm sorry, do you recall some of the slogans from 79 or what people were saying?
people were just they wanted just to share in this oil where they actually were working. They wanted some dignified life, roads, just basic services. There was no call for regime change or anything like that. They just wanted to have decent life and free from this extreme poverty. My cousin, my first cousin, who was shot and killed in front of his house, his name is Salman Rahain. He was a young 28, I think, 28 years old. And, he was a fisherman, poor fisherman, lived in a shanty house, just some boarded up wood and some metal roofing, no running water, no electricity, nothing. And this was close to the main road, and he was killed in front of his door. So, and with an American-made machine gun, if you remember those JC3, they call them. They don't use them anymore. They are the predecessors of the M16. So the slogans really before the shooting of people and killing them was just basically we wanted to be free. We wanted to have some wealth from this oil. So that
Mhm.
it says like the oil is for us, not for the outsiders or for you. And the answer was basically is to shoot people. They
And I
had
understand there were helicopters monitoring the protest.
yes, the preceding and after the day where people were shot in that funeral, the people were running a funeral. That was the worst day. a young man who was in high school and he was shot. So his funeral turned into a protest, and that's the day that we call it the Bloody Thursday, where actually it's in front of my house, current house right now, my family house. And I cannot remember, was it before that or after that day? But I remember helicopters were flying at night. The government had cut off electricity. At the time there was no internet, but they cut off electricity
Mhm.
of the entire city. So helicopters were roaming overhead and using their spotlight or searchlight to see if anybody was walking on the street. Those days, we later found that a woman in our city was shot. She had gone up to her roof. Our roof there are flat roofs, so they are like a terrace. So people put their clothes to dry, or they put some stuff, like a storage. So she went up to do some housework, and they saw her and they shot her. A sniper killed her, and she was at home. She was in her house. Her name is Fatma Gharib, and so that was later. I had asked of the former CIA here in Washington, CIA chief station in Dhahran nearby, what was the American role, and he talked about that, about the helicopters being flown by American. The Saudis did not have the pilots or the expertise and the training for snipers from helicopters. The Americans who were based in Dhahran, uh, 25 miles away, where helicopters were flown from, had those capabilities, and it was a Chinook. I remember that,
We
because
should
later I'm
remind our viewers that Jimmy Carter was the president all during this time.
yes, he was the president. Yes, and he
Now,
was.
I'm sorry, you were.
Yeah, I had a call and I told you I don't have the use of my computer, unfortunately.
Now, I wanted to get the religious aspect in this. So you come from a Shia family. I think most Americans don't even know that there are Shia in Saudi Arabia. They think everyone is a Sunni, but that isn't the case. About what percent are Shia in Saudi Arabia, and how are they treated by the kingdom?
The majority and the historical majority of the eastern Arabia, the west coast of the Persian Gulf, especially in where I come from, in Qatif, which is a very old civilization, has been always Shia majority. And my ancestors actually, from both sides of my family, came from the western part of Arabia. They were Sunni Muslims, but they came, I think, 200 years ago or something. We don't have the date, but our lineage goes back to different parts of Arabia, not to the eastern border. That area has been always Shia. In fact, this is something people don't pay attention to. The first Shia community in history was born in that part of the world. That was the first Shia community, and it was an area that they embraced Islam early on without, just they actually sent a delegation to the Prophet and had, inquired about this new religion, and they embraced it. And they went back, and they all of them decided to become Muslim. And after during his life, the seed of Shia Muslims, sort of the support of Ali, was born, and that's since then it has been like that. So this is nothing new in terms of that area being Shia. In fact, we, as my ancestors were Sunnis, they came there and they did turn into Shia Muslims. It's within the same religion, but I have no idea why they decided to do that, but they did. Um, so in terms of the percentage, we do not really know. Because Saudi Arabia is like the North Korea, the American North Korea, basically, sort of the American backed North Korea. Information is very hard to get this kind of information at least. So I tried to get it and use all kind of numbers, especially government numbers, because I can't just pull numbers from thin air. But we're talking about substantial percent of the population. One of the things that recently I found, for example, is the capital Riyadh. When something I will be we will be doing a report on that capital Riyadh, which now has like 4 million, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, maybe up to 1 million people in capital Riyadh are Shia. These people who came from different parts of the country, because Shia Arabs in who are citizens of the Saudi state not only reside in the east, which is actually the largest province. Saudi Arabia has 13 provinces. The largest province in Saudi Arabia is the eastern province, which is the Shia majority. Then you have Shia in Medina. That's one third basically there, and the villages around it. And you have Shia in Jeddah and in Riyadh, to my surprise, in fact. But I had checked with several people who live there separate, and then they all had, and these people are educated and people who are involved in, they talked about, 500,000 to 1 million. So the range is there between half to 1 million Shia Muslim. The problem is, with American and British support, these Shia Muslims are not even allowed to gather to pray. And they are citizens of that country. They're not visitors or foreign workers. They cannot gather to do their required prayers or to have weddings, or if any of them die, they had to go take their body to a Shia majority city. And I had met people who are originally from Riyadh. Now the Shia in Riyadh, a lot of them just came for work. I have a cousin who has been there for 50 years, basically, for half a century, since I was a child. And he continues to live there. He was, his kids are born there, and that's from there. But I'm talking about people who were there 100 or 200 years ago, and these people do not share their identity. They are in fear we do not know who they are. We do not know what their numbers. And I had written about them 20 some years ago, the invisible Shia, and they are in Riyadh, but people think they are Sunnis. In addition to them, you have the other uh, sort of branch of Shiism, like Ismailis.
So I bring up the Shia Sunni divide. It's of interest, but also, was that a factor in the protests in 1979?
Absolutely not. The fact that the regime is a Sunni and they are Shia has no bearing. When we were kids, I mean, I was 12 years old basically, and it didn't even cross my mind that they are Sunni and we are Shia. It was about the justice, about resources, the fact that we lived on a lake of oil, which was making billions of dollars a day, and we had nothing. We didn't have the hospitals, the roads, the schools, the jobs. We were poor, although we lived. And my family is not a poor family, but the society was a poor.
People wanted
And
their share.
yes, of course. And then, in fact, after that, and after dozens of people were killed and thousands were thrown in prison, um, the government at the time took extreme action or urgent actions to bring some development. Then we started seeing the roads and the hospitals and things getting better. It has gotten better, but you still have the suffocating extremism in terms of people's right to speak. The Saudi government is definitely an anti-Shia government. That's no doubt about it. Continue to do so, but they are also anti-people. I mean, Shia maybe get some additional restrictions, but at the same time, it's a dictatorship that does not spare any of its citizens, and
Well,
that has
let's go
continued
back
to
to
get
Jimmy
worse.
Carter. Let's go
Yeah.
back to Jimmy Carter. And now let's talk about the Carter Doctrine. What was that?
Well, Carter really wanted to occupy the Arab countries, and they decided that to use the red scare again, not against Americans this time, but against the population, against Arabs and Muslims. So it was suitable for them to say, because of the communism, we must support the Shah and his murder of thousands of people. We must support the Saudi, the racist Saudi monarchy and their dictatorship and other Gulf dictatorships. So the goal really was to what Carter did, unlike other presidents. He brought the American military to this. Now the American military has, I don't know, not dozens of bases, much more than the number of American troops in the Gulf and Iraq and in the region in general has like multiplied, dozens and dozens of times. And Carter started it. This lie that himself and his team of extreme bigots like Zbigniew Brzezinski was an anti-Muslim, a known anti-Muslim hater who wanted Muslims to kill Russians and Russians to kill Muslims, and so we'll sell the Muslims the weapons and send their kids to die for us, and so we can destroy the Soviet Union, because he
And
hated the Soviet Union.
specifically, this was just after um, things had heated up in Afghanistan. The Soviets sent troops in there, and Carter said that this possibly was the beginning of a Soviet invasion of the Gulf.
Yes, yes. I mean, that was all a lie. There is nothing like that. But what they did, they, instead of empowering the people to defend themselves, they created these spaces, and American taxpayer, instead of being spent on fixing roads and feeding the homeless in Washington D.C., it is now there to benefit arms manufacturers and the military industrial complex, and a lot of people in politics. And the worst thing is to defend dictators who are killing and oppressing people across, not only in their countries, but even in the United States. We talk about this American who has been in Saudi prisons and trapped in Saudi Arabia, and the Biden administration is not doing anything about that. This is something I was trying to write before Carter dies, in terms of like what Carter did. He actually, because of his policies, the United States has adopted, because you are friends with dictators. Now you have some of their policies. The idea is you influence them, so they open up. But now, because you are close friends, as Carter says it, oh, I love the prince. He got tens of millions of dollars from the Saudi monarchy and other monarchies. So the United States now has the similar laws they basically borrowed from the Saudis and other dictatorships. And
All
that's
right, we,
because,
we could get into that a little later, but I just want to point out that when we're talking about the money spent in the Gulf, we're not
yes,
talking about billions or even hundreds of billions. We're talking
yes,
about trillions. A professor from Princeton, I believe, said
yes,
$8 trillion. And this was what,
yes,
10, 15 years ago, he made this estimate. It's
yes, yes.
extraordinary.
I wrote about it, in fact, for the Political magazine, and I was like, "Why are you spending this money, which is worth less than the oil that you buy from the Gulf?" The entire Gulf. Every year you're spending this money, and then it doesn't make any sense. It's like buying an expensive insurance policy for a car that is so old and worth like $500, and you spend thousands of dollars on insurance protection for it. It's very obviously, it's a lot of corruption, but also the worst part of it it enables these dictatorships to survive. And if it's Carter who helped the Saudi monarchy to survive until today. The
Let's talk
others
about
continue.
Carter and the Afghan extremists. He
Yes.
supported the right-wing extremists in Afghanistan with money and weapons. What was he doing there?
So one thing is they're very important for American viewers to think to see is that most of their politicians, when they make policies, they do not see the people in that region. They do not care what happens to them. It doesn't even cross their mind. Oh, but this will affect the people there. This will happen. They do not. It does not cross their mind because, unfortunately, but I have to say it because I am one of those millions of victims. These people see the Arabs and Muslims as worthless. Madeleine Albright said it when she said, "Oh, it's worth it. 500,000 Iraqi kids." But if you take the word Iraqi and put Christian or Jewish kids, she would not say that. But because they see us as worthless humans, when what Carter did, he took Afghanistan from a modern country, secular country, under the lie that the Soviets are going to move from Afghanistan and they will occupy the Gulf and they will take that and do all of that. And what they did, Carter enabled the coup in Pakistan and then support war in Afghanistan that destroyed both countries. These countries were stable. They were, they had something going for them. But now it's almost 45 years later. Afghanistan is becoming is the millions of people who have died by starvation, by bombs, by war, by ugliness, and the destruction of trillions of dollars, both in Pakistan and Afghanistan, uh, and of course affected the entire region. For what? It was based on a lie, and
And of
based on
course,
this fear that was and conspiracy that did not exist,
and of
and
course, some of
nobody's
these
apologizing for it.
extremists became
Yes.
the Al Qaeda, which attacked
Yes, of
the
course.
U.S. on
That's
9/11.
I was always called Carter the father, the godfather of Al Qaeda, because he is the one who started using uh, uh, non-state actors and funding them, like Osama bin Laden and the Taliban and the people before the Taliban, to start a war and continue to kill and commit massacres and atrocities. So it's very insulting when I hear somebody says the human rights president. What? Whose human right? The Afghans that he has destroyed their country multiple times. The Pakistanis who lost their democracy because of him. The people in my country who could have removed the monarchy and now could have some open society that allows women, that we could have had a lot women driving 40 years ago. But because Carter, uh, the problem, he grew up in this sort of supremacist environment with this sort of idea that Arabs and Muslims are worth nothing. They do not they didn't care, and he just cared about the money. And I can tell you, I had interaction with the Carter Center over several cases, and that's what my reaction was, and my experience was: these people care nothing for the people, and this whole thing is a sham,
All right, I want to
and
get
the
into
man is
that.
evil.
Wanted to get into that now. Sometimes you hear some liberals say, well, Carter wasn't so good as president, but once he got out, he became a very great humanitarian. So first, let's talk about 1989. And now Carter is no longer president for, years. And the Saudis do a PR campaign called Saudi Arabia Yesterday and Today. You came to the US to hold demonstrations and
Yes.
events
Yes.
about it. Why? What happened there?
Well, in the 80s, I was young and I left the country, and I was kind of working underground. So my activism, they asked me because they wanted somebody who speaks English. My English was not pretty good, but I did speak, some English. So I came to the US from my country to participate in this campaign. We called it the other face of Saudi Arabia. And that campaign was to counter the Saudi PR campaign. They spent hundreds of millions. I think it was 200 millions at the time. They had 3 week. They rented the convention center in Washington, and then in Atlanta and Dallas and New York, Los Angeles, and so we traveled. We trailed that. We shoved ourselves in these rented vans, and we traveled, and we shoved ourselves in, like 10 people in one room in the motel or something. And our campaign was basically asking for a constitution, for women's rights, for human rights, and I wish I had prepared to show you the material, and I will send you a video. Maybe you can use it in the editing. Carter, it was the one in Atlanta who inaugurated this 2 week. It was 2 weeks in convention downtown Atlanta. It was my first time going to Atlanta, and we were there for 2 weekends, and we were dressed up in our national attire, and we were protesting against it. They said where there is not a single woman inside that convention, or that it was, and the idea was to make people say, oh, Saudi Arabia is now a modern country because of the Saudi clan, and the Americans are supporting that. He opened it. So how is it when he goes there and endorse a dictatorship that did not have a single woman in that working in that convention or that exhibition, and he came and supported it? And if you look at that movie or documentary, Dark Money, he's in there, and he expresses love to the Saudi monarchy. So how is that person a human rights president? I have no idea. I mean,
Let's
he
talk
took
about
money from some.
The Carter Center. You briefly sort of mentioned it here and there, but let's talk about that in detail. So the Carter Center is supposed to promote human rights all over the world, and you approached the Carter Center for help?
Twice over the years, twice, over 2 cases. The last case was about a young man who was 17 at the time, and he was taken and sent to death in Saudi court for saying a word, a joke that it was interpreted as sacrilege. So he spent 20 years in prison on death row, and I worked on his case. I mean, I did a lot of work, and I said, maybe the best way is to go back to Carter. Maybe he will do something. And they blocked me. Basically, they told me to go away. One of their employees, God bless her soul, Miss Ashley, she called me and she told me, look, Ali, this is what happened. They're not going to help you. And he was going to Saudi Arabia. I learned that he was going to meet at the time King Abdullah, and he refused to address this issue. He did not care about it. And I even send a letter to the. I did some work. I sent a letter to the class he was teaching. He was teaching church or Bible school to kids. So I sent a letter to that class to say, this is what can you please ask Mr. Jimmy Carter to help this young man who was from the minority Ismaili in the southern part of our country, who was on death row at the time. So he did not move a finger or help with that case. It was not surprising, but for me it was an opportunity to make sure that I was right, and also to make a point in history that the lie that Jimmy Carter was for human rights is a lie. It's a lie. He's not, and in
You
fact, he
said there
took
was
money.
another case you
Yeah,
tried.
it was a case in the 80s. Another Saudi person who was deported from the United States, and I was asking him to make sure he spares his life. But again, they didn't write back or call or anything. So It was, a long time ago. But and all in all, Carter has never said or done anything. I am, really, I'm the dean of human rights in Saudi Arabia. I've been working on human rights for nearly 4 decades, so longer than anyone I know. And so I have no inkling that he has done a single thing. He has not made a single statement, public or private. I remember they would say, "Oh, quiet diplomacy," and I said, "Yeah, that's equals to I'm not going to do anything, but I want to take credit for it too." So that's exactly what happened. I know I had sources in the government, and they said Carter just came to ask for money, and he got a check. That's the whole idea, and you can see that interview on PBS with the documentary "Dark Money" or "Black Money," and you can see how he loves the monarchy, and he defended them not one time, many times.
And I would point out, if you go to the website of the Carter Center, you can see 75 pages for different countries, but there's no page for Saudi Arabia at all.
Or the Gulf countries, not only Saudi Arabia. Because I think it has to do. Look, you can understand a person by looking at his history. The man has religious doctrine that views Arabs and Muslims in a bad light. So, and that's the reason. That's one important part of behavior. Because if you see people as human, you would actually, do something. I personally don't ask people in power in this country to like bomb any government, or just say a few things. Say, we really we can't really give you this. It's just kind stuff. You don't have to do anything. Just my experience is I have not seen that from Carter. I saw the opposite. To me, he is one of the worst American presidents, because he started this whole chapter that we are suffering in the he defended and protected dictators, even as like you wrote yourself about the Shah. He didn't want the Shah to go away. He wanted the Shah to stay. He it's just things kind of. He lost control of things, and the people at the time, it was too much to stop.
Now, you nicely mentioned an article I wrote. This was back in 2011 about Jimmy Carter, looking at his diary. And we'll link to that in the comment below this interview. But before we end our talk, for people interested in your work, what is the website of the Institute for Gulf Affairs?
It's www.gulfinstitute.org. I just want to say that it's important that we do not sanctify any politician. And it's unfortunate that in the United States, where people are supposed to have their right to express their opinion. Carter was not a saint, was not a human rights president, and we should stop, awarding sainthood to politicians, especially presidents, because what that does, it makes them even worse, and makes them think that they are infallible, and anything that they do is legal, like Nixon said. Carter was like that. He did something that I really, really, I think it's not only hurt the people in my part of the world, but in America, by imitating those dictatorships. Because in exchange, you taking the money from it's stolen money, So to take it under the guise, oh, we're helping fight disease and so on. At the end, you end up America being like these dictatorships, not the other way around. The influence is, I have to call it something. There's no theorem on this in political science, and I was going to call it Carterism, because he is the one who basically made it official. He opened the door for dictators to have basically their ideas and their standards up part of the American laws. Hence all this patriot stuff that we're dealing with, and all these laws that are extreme and suffocating the freedoms of Americans. from surveillance and so on. These are product of what Carter did and enabled those dictators.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Thank you so much. Right.